Life is dear. I will never understand, I'll never understand why people become weary of life. I may, whenever I get so old that I can't raise a finger, and I'm almost hoping that I will not get that old. But I cannot understand anybody not appreciating life. I can't understand people who will dispose of life, either their own or somebody else's. I just can't understand that, because living is so dear. I would suggest, in the first place, that, and these are suggestions, I'm not on this. I'm not certainly trying to preach or dictate. I would suggest that develop broad interests. Life in its totality is absolutely fascinating. It was William Blake who said, "To see a world in a grain of sand, and a heaven in a wild flower, to hold infinity in the palm of your hands, and eternity in an hour." To me, that means life is fascinating. If a person so chose, I think that he could spend his or her life studying a grain of sand and never exhaust it. I do believe that life is just that fascinating. And I believe that the seeming infinitude of interest that life holds is in itself a suggestion of its creator. I could never be a specialist. I am thankful for specialists, but I can never join their ranks. There are too many things in life that fascinate me, and to be a specialist I would have to ignore too much, and I could not do it. So many things that that's all right. You have to go. You going to sing this morning? I'm coming here. You know, in the Middle Ages, the people developed this concept of the chain of being. And the chain of being was an attempt to explain everything that is, and to see it in its connectedness. And this chain went all the way from the feet of God, the throne of God, whatever, right down to the very smallest thing imaginable. Well, the chain of being was, of course, a huge metaphor, and it was an excellent metaphor that was designed to show the integration of all that is. Now, it seems to me that if that's true, then that it is hard, if not impossible, to study any one thing and study it properly in isolation. In more modern times, we've talked about in the physical world this notion of ecosystem. And that simply is an attempt to do in the physical world the same thing that the people in the Middle Ages did with the whole of reality. There is such an infinite, seemingly infinite chain. This chain is finite, but nobody knew how many links there were, you see. And so it was kind of like it was an infinite thing. Do you know that something happened just last week and ran into this week that will not happen again for 100 years? Some of you know what it was. Does anybody in here know? Or do you know? I grew up in the country in Tennessee. I grew up in a poor family. There were 8 kids, you know. When there are 8 kids, you got to be poor, right? Well, I grew up in the country, and I was outside a lot. And I will always remember how much the moon and stars meant to me when I was a kid growing up. Well, something happened last week in that all the planets were lined up in an arc. One of them was east of the moon. The moon was about a crescent when it started. And then there was the moon, and then there was stars. There was Jupiter, at least close to the moon. Then a couple of planets you had to have binoculars to see with. Then Venus, then Mars on her side, right side, as you face them where, of course, you would expect them to be. And then 2 or 3 others on the west of that, including Pluto, which you couldn't see without a telescope. I don't know why it is, students, but I have noticed that for several years that my students have not been aware of the heavens. I don't know what that is. I know how it is, maybe it's because you're in school. How many of you looked at the stars? How many of you looked at the planets and so forth as you were growing up? Let's see. Okay, good. Well, of course, you know, you could hardly fail if you opened your eyes at all. You could hardly fail to see Venus at different times of the year. She is so bright. But don't be like, may I admonish you, don't be like the pagan god Mammon, who is described by Milton in Paradise Lost as being that god who is stooped. He's stooped like this. And you know why he's stooped like this? Milton says he stooped like this because he spent all of his time walking around admiring the gold in the street of heaven. When did you ever have a chance to look up? When did you ever have a chance to look up? Abraham Lincoln said, I can see how a man might look into the mud and wonder if there's a God. That said, I cannot for the life of me understand how a man can look into the starry heavens on a clear night and wonder if there's a God. Get out of the city, get out of the lights. A little 150-watt bulb can block out millions of stars, you know? You're standing right under it. Wrap it up. Wintertime's a good time to see the atmosphere. Get out and look at the stars. I'm done. Secondly, read. Don't let the Jew destroy your love for reading. If you don't like to read, maybe you'll learn it. I know how it is. I was in school a long time, longer than you've ever been, I'm sure. And I know how it is to read because you have to read. But find something. Take a little time. Find something that you read because you want to read in the midst of all of this have-to-read stuff. The stuff that teachers lay on you. But what teachers lay on you is ordinary. Pretty good. Maybe all of it's not.